The Chinese Communist Party is working to push its influence across the global stage. But what's the most likely way the regime would choose to strike the U.S. in times of conflict? A book published in 1999 by two Chinese colonels suggests it may be possible without military force. A retired Air Force Brigadier General explained the issue in an interview with the Epoch Times American Thought Leaders program.
Weapons, battlefields, and soldiers have been the picture of wars for centuries. But in 1999, two Chinese colonels devised a new form of warfare that may not require any of it.
When it came out, and it was kind of esoteric, a little bit complicated, really sounding crazy.
General Spalding is an expert on the Chinese regime's key strategy, unrestricted warfare. Its first rule is, there are no rules, according to what the Chinese colonels told to an interviewer. Therefore, any and all tools are allowed when trying to defeat a technologically superior adversary, like the U.S., without firing a single shot. How is that done? From hacking into websites, to flooding U.S. streets with fentanyl, to stealing intellectual property. And now another method is being used, exploiting the current world situation, the global pandemic.
How can I use it to my advantage? And so, unrestricted warfare, makes perfect sense that you would shut down domestic travel and allow international travel. Why? Because you want to take advantage of, you don't want to suffer the pandemic on your own. I mean, that's what we would expect, right? We would expect, no, let's keep it within, if it happened in America, let's keep it here. Let's don't let it break out internationally. Well, now you're not thinking like the Chinese Communist Party, where, warfare is daily. It never ends. There's no beginning and end like there is here in the West.
China is the world's second largest air travel market after the U.S. But during the beginning of the pandemic, China continued to allow international travel to and from Hubei province, the epicenter of the outbreak. That's well past the date when China imposed harsh restrictions on domestic travel to isolate Wuhan.
If you're the Chinese Communist Party, if you're saying domestically you're not going to allow Chinese nationals to fly in country, but you are going to allow them to fly internationally, not only are you going to allow them to fly, if a country says, don't fly to our nation, you're going to say that they're essentially being racist. You've really got to think hard about that. Like, what's the motivation behind that?
On February 4th, 2020, Chinese authorities requested that local airlines continue to operate flights to countries that didn't impose travel restrictions. Throughout January and February, China imposed lockdowns as the virus spread within its cities, but continued to allow international travel abroad. It was only on March 27, 2020, after the virus had become a global pandemic, that China closed its borders to foreign visitors.
Everybody needs to suffer the pandemic, because if we all suffer the pandemic, then we'll be able to take advantage of that fact. What do we have? We own the supply chain. What are they going to need? PPE and masks and everything else. So how do we take advantage of that? I mean, this is the way the Chinese Communist Party thinks.
The pandemic has allowed China to gain influence by offering the world much-needed public health goods. Beijing has attempted to portray its medical supplies as donations, but a think tank report found that more than 99% of China's PPE exports in 2020 were sold, not donated.
Hey, you have a shared vision for, how humans should treat other humans. And the Chinese Communist Party just is not that type of organization.
Since the outbreak first broke out in Wuhan back in 2019, the Chinese Communist Party has been hiding data and not sharing vital information about the virus within the international community. That includes what the party knew about human-to-human transmission and how fast the virus spreads.
So within China, the message was, this is really, really bad. But there's no data. No data forthcoming. To this day, there's no data forthcoming out of China.
General Spalding says that made global scientists reliant on China for solutions.
So scientists need data. The Chinese were obfuscating the data. Well, if you don't have data and you don't want to be wrong to the low side of casualties, because you want to be prepared for the worst. So plan for the worst, hope for the best. That's what you're thinking as an epidemiologist.
He adds the Chinese Communist Party will never come out and say anything when there's a crisis. Instead, it will watch the situation and take advantage of it.
It was all designed to create enormous fear within populations all around the globe. Now, the first step of gaining control of any population is to create some kind of fear. You're willing to give up your freedoms because you seek safety. And so in unrestricted warfare, they talk about this idea of, how do you create fear and how do you take advantage of fear?
Spalding says that fear itself was the unrestricted warfare doctrine in play at the time. But as for achieving it, that's where the use of internet comes into play, which Spalding says far surpasses any other weapon system ever deployed in history.